He was a billionaire running from guilt. She was a homeless girl hiding a secret. What they discovered inside an airport chapel changed everything. It was just past midnight when William Hawthorne stepped into the airport chapel. The world outside moved in constant rhythm. Announcements, wheels on tile, rushed footsteps. But in here, there was only quiet. A holy hush, as if grief itself had taken a seat in the front pew. William wasn't the kind of man you'd expect to find here. CEO of Hawthorne Industries, one of the wealthiest men in America, his life had been headlines and helicopters. But none of that mattered tonight. Not since Ethan. His only son had died 3 months ago. An overdose in a motel room in Denver, alone, estranged, lost. William had booked a red-eye flight out of sheer impulse, maybe to escape the mansion too quiet to bear, maybe to chase a ghost, or maybe because he couldn't sleep with the weight of regret. The chapel was dimly lit, just a few rows of wooden pews, stained glass panels dimmed by the night, and a simple altar with a flickering candle. William sat heavily in the back row, loosened his tie, and buried his face in his hands. That's when he heard it. A sound so soft it might have been mist in the outside chaos. A girl crying. He looked up. There, in the front pew, barely more than a silhouette, was a young girl. She wore a faded denim jacket several sizes too big, and sneakers with holes in the toes. Her hair hung in messy waves, and her face was pressed into her sleeve. She couldn't have been older than 12, maybe 13. Something stirred in him. He cleared his throat gently. She jumped. "I'm sorry," she whispered quickly, backing away. "I'll go. I didn't mean—" "No," William said softly, raising a hand. "You're fine. You have every right to be here." She paused, eyes wide, uncertain. The chapel door creaked as the wind rattled it gently. The moment hung there, fragile. "Are you all right?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. The girl hesitated. "I'm just waiting," she said, not convincingly. "Waiting for who?" "My dad," she said, voice breaking slightly. William's breath caught. He didn't know why. It was a common enough lie. Or maybe it wasn't a lie at all. "You look cold," he said gently. "Do you want something to eat? There's a cafe just outside." She shook her head. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers." "Smart," he said with a sad smile. "But maybe just this once, I'll make an exception and introduce myself. My name is William." She stared at him. Her eyes were too old for her age, eyes that had seen too much too soon. "Ellie," she replied quietly. "Nice to meet you, Ellie." She gave a small nod, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. William took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Why are you really here, Ellie?" Silence. She looked down, fingers playing with a frayed thread on her sleeve. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said finally, her voice barely audible. The words hit him harder than expected. He leaned back, overwhelmed by a strange mix of protectiveness and sorrow. There was something about her, not just the vulnerability, but something familiar. "I've lost someone too," he said after a long pause. "My son, Ethan." At the sound of that name, Ellie's eyes flicked up to his. There was a beat, then another. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. William didn't notice. He just looked toward the altar, lost in memory. "Do you come here often?" he asked, almost out of habit. Ellie nodded. "Sometimes it's quiet and it feels safe." William smiled faintly. "Yes, it does." He didn't press her further. Something told him she wasn't ready, and maybe neither was he. They sat there in silence for a long time, two strangers, two broken souls. And in that quiet airport chapel, something unspoken passed between them. Not yet truth, but something close. The chapel had grown colder, Or maybe it was just the quiet settling deeper around them. William glanced sideways at the girl, still curled slightly, like someone who had learned the world could be dangerous even in its silences. He shifted in his seat. "How long have you been here, Ellie?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she clutched the strap of a worn backpack that rested at her feet. It was pink once, now mostly grey from dirt and time. "A few days," she murmured. "Maybe more." William's stomach turned. A child, alone in an airport chapel for days. How many people had passed her by? Had anyone stopped? "Don't you have any family?" he asked gently. She looked up at him with that same tired gaze. "Not anymore." Her voice cracked at the end. She blinked fast, refusing to cry again. William knew that kind of strength. It was the kind born not from bravery, but from exhaustion, from holding too much in for too long. "I can help," he said softly. "We can call someone. Maybe the police." "No," she said quickly, sitting up straighter. "Please, not the police. I'll be fine. I just need to wait. Someone's supposed to come." Her eyes darted toward the chapel door as if expecting a miracle. William felt the weight in his chest tighten. He'd spent his life building skyscrapers, launching companies, acquiring power. Yet here, in front of a child with nowhere to go, he felt entirely powerless. "Who are you waiting for?" he asked. She hesitated. "My dad." The lie again. Or was it? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Ellie, I told you. I lost my son, Ethan, not long ago. I know what it's like to hurt and hide, but I also know what it's like to need someone." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she unzipped the front pocket of her backpack. Inside was a small notebook with peeling stickers on the cover. She flipped it open, turned it around, and handed it to him. It was a drawing, crayon, a little messy. But clear enough. It showed a man with a guitar and a little girl holding his hand. Above it, written in childish handwriting, "Me and Daddy, Ethan." William froze. He blinked hard, gripping the notebook as though it might dissolve in his hands. Where did you get this?" Ellie's voice was barely above a whisper. "He was my dad." A sound escaped William's throat, half gasp, half groan. He stared at her, eyes scanning her face, the eyes, the curve of her jaw. There was something familiar. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. Ethan never told me." "He said you wouldn't want to know," she said quickly. "He said you hated him, that you threw him out and never looked back." William felt like the air had been punched from his lungs. She looked down. "But he didn't hate you. Not really. He used to talk about you. Sometimes. When he played music. When he was sad." He sat there, stunned. His mind trying to connect dots that were forming too fast. Ellie reached into the backpack again, this time pulling out something small and metallic, a locket. She opened it. Inside was a photo, faded, creased, but unmistakable. A young Ethan, maybe 17, standing next to William at a company gala. William remembered that night, the last one before their fight, the same fight that sent Ethan away for good. Now that son was gone, and this girl, this child, was all that was left of him. William's hand trembled as he touched the photo. My God. Ellie stared at him, eyes wide, unsure if she had made a mistake. She whispered, "You really didn't know?" He shook his head slowly, painfully. "No, I didn't." The silence returned, but it was heavier now, filled with memories, regrets, and the slow realization that something had just changed, forever. William didn't speak for a long time. The locket rested in his palm like it weighed 100 pounds. The past had a strange way of coming back, not in big, obvious moments, but quietly, in whispers, in a crayon drawing. in the eyes of a girl he hadn't known existed an hour ago. He looked at Ellie again. She was hugging her backpack to her chest now, as if she feared it might be taken from her. Her shoulders were small, but her posture was proud, guarded, just like Ethan had been. "Ellie," he said softly, as if tasting the name for the first time. "Is that short for something?" She nodded. "Elizabeth." He froze. Elizabeth. His breath caught in his throat. Ethan's final letter, mailed weeks before his death, unopened until after the funeral, had mentioned someone. A name, scribbled in shaky handwriting between lines of anger, regret, and apology. "If I could go back, I'd do everything differently. For her, for Elizabeth." William had thought it was a girlfriend. Maybe a woman Ethan had loved and lost. But now, looking at the girl in front of him, it all made sense. He swallowed hard. "Did your dad ever tell you about me?" Ellie shrugged. "Not much. Just that you were rich, important, that he wasn't." "That's not true," William said, his voice hoarse. "He was everything." She tilted her head. "Then why didn't you help him?" The question stabbed deeper than anything he'd heard in years. He looked down, ashamed. "Because I was proud, stubborn, and afraid." Ellie didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence said everything. William cleared his throat. Did he ever mention where he came from?" She nodded. "He said he grew up in a big house, that he ran away when he was 16. He said he never looked back." "He didn't have to," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "Because I never went after him." The weight of those words crushed him. He had spent decades building a world so big he thought it would hold everything he loved. But somehow, in all that steel and glass, he'd left no room for the one thing that truly mattered: family. He looked at Ellie again. "Do you know why he named you Elizabeth?" She shook her head. William smiled faintly. "It was my mother's name. Ethan adored her." Her eyes lit up just slightly, a piece of her father's past slipping gently into place. A few beats of silence passed. Then Ellie asked the question William had been dreading. "Why did you stop talking to him?" He stared straight ahead at the stained glass window. The colors looked different now, less beautiful, more broken. "Because I told him music was a waste of time," he said quietly. "Because I told him he had to be like me. And he didn't want to be." "No," William said, shaking his head. "He wanted to be free, and I punished him for it." Ellie looked down at her lap. "He was happy, I think, even when we didn't have much. He sang to me every night." William closed his eyes. The boy with a guitar, once full of promise. The man on a cold motel floor, gone too soon. And in between, the father he could have been. "I should have found him," he whispered. "I should have made things right." Ellie's voice was soft. He said, "Sometimes things break so bad, they don't go back." He looked at her. "Do you believe that?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I'm still waiting to find out." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, offering it to her. She took it slowly. For the first time, she smiled. Just a little. It wasn't much, but it was a start. William sat motionless, his mind spinning. The locket still rested in his hand, warm now from his grip, as if holding it long enough could somehow turn back time. Ellie had gone quiet again. She was watching him, but not with fear. More like curiosity. As if she, too, was trying to solve a mystery. "Do you remember where you lived with your father?" William asked gently. Ellie nodded. "A lot of places. We moved a lot. Sometimes we stayed with friends. Sometimes we slept in the car. But for a while, there was a little apartment above a bookstore in Denver." William's heart clenched. He had a business trip in Denver 2 years ago. He remembered seeing a man playing guitar on a sidewalk near Union Station. His face had looked familiar for a split second, but William kept walking. "I think I saw him once," he said aloud, more to himself than to her. "But I didn't stop." Ellie's voice trembled. "He got sick a few months ago, bad cough, but he wouldn't go to the hospital. He said we didn't have insurance, and he didn't want to leave me alone." William looked down at the floor. That image, Ethan, proud even in poverty, choosing suffering over separation, hit him like a wave. "He died in a motel room," Ellie added, her voice raw now. "I found him the next morning. He was cold." William covered his face with both hands, shaking. "I'm sorry," Ellie whispered. He looked up, startled. "Why would you say that?" "Because you're crying," she said, simple and true. William reached out, not touching her but close. "You don't have to be sorry for telling the truth, Ellie, never. The truth is all we have now." She pulled something from her backpack again, this time a small envelope, worn and smudged. "He told me to give this to you, if I ever found you." William took it with trembling hands. On the front, in Ethan's handwriting, were the words, "Dad, if it's not too late." He stared at it. His eyes burned, but he didn't open it yet. Not here, not now. Instead, he looked at Ellie. "Did he talk about me in the end?" She nodded. "He said he was sorry, but he said he didn't think you'd care anymore." William's voice cracked. He was wrong. God, he was so wrong. Ellie sat back down, closer now, her tiny shoulder almost touching his. She pulled up the sleeve of her jacket and showed him a bracelet made of string and plastic beads. The letters spelled hope. "Daddy made it for me," she said. "Said it was the one thing I should never lose." William blinked fast, trying to keep his voice steady. He was right. They sat there in the quiet of the chapel, the air heavy with things unsaid, but also things beginning to heal. William looked down at the envelope once more. He would open it soon. But first, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and placed a call. "Harold," he said when his assistant answered, "I need a room at the airport hotel. No questions. And tomorrow, we'll talk about custody." He looked at Ellie. She didn't speak, but her eyes asked a dozen questions. He smiled softly. "If it's all right with you, I'd like to stay close, maybe even get to know you." Ellie hesitated, then nodded. It was small, but it was everything. The airport chapel had emptied out. A cleaning staff member passed by outside with a cart, but the soft sound of wheels on tile barely registered. Inside, time had slowed. William sat beside Ellie, the silence between them no longer awkward, just heavy with memory. She was still clutching her backpack. He had offered her a hotel room, a meal, even new clothes. She had politely refused everything, not out of rudeness, but out of habit. She was used to not accepting too much. It was safer that way. He watched her for a moment. Then gently he asked, "Ellie, do you know why Ethan left?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "He said it was because he didn't want to be someone he wasn't." William nodded slowly. "That's true." He took a deep breath. "I told him he had to take over the family company. I told him music was a fantasy. I told him he'd embarrass me if he kept chasing it." He could still remember the look on Ethan's face the night he said those words. Hurt, betrayal, and something worse, disbelief, like a door had slammed shut in his heart. "He left that night," William continued. "I thought he'd come back when he was ready to be serious. I didn't know. He was gone for good." Ellie stayed quiet, absorbing each word like puzzle pieces she hadn't known were missing. "He said you didn't understand," she murmured, "that you loved what he could become, not who he was." William nodded, his jaw tight. That's exactly right. Her eyes shimmered. He was a really good dad. He didn't have much, but he made everything feel like enough. William swallowed hard. I missed his whole life, and I didn't even know about you. I've been angry at myself for months. But now I realize it's worse than I thought. I didn't just lose a son, I lost a chance to know the kind of man he became. Ellie looked away, her voice nearly inaudible. He didn't tell me much about you. But when he talked about your house, your suits, your meetings, he didn't sound angry, just sad. William exhaled. That hurt more than shouting ever could. He wrote music about you, Ellie added almost shyly. He had this old notebook full of songs. I used to watch him sit by the window and play. Sometimes he cried. Do you still have it? William asked, breath catching. She shook her head. He pawned the guitar, sold the notebook with some clothes when things got really bad. William closed his eyes. Of course, Ethan's final years had been stripped of everything, his dreams, his tools, his art. Except for her. Do you want to know something strange? Ellie asked almost cautiously. He nodded. When he died, I didn't feel alone. I felt like he was still around, like he wanted me to find someone. William looked at her with eyes wide. Do you think he meant me? She nodded once, slowly. Maybe. Or maybe he just hoped someone would care. He reached out again, not to touch her, but to offer his hand, palm open. She looked at it for a long time before placing her smaller one in his. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a bridge. I can't change the past, he said, but I can be here now. For you. She gave a faint smile. He would have liked that. Outside, a plane roared to life on the tarmac. The lights of the airport glowed through the chapel's stained glass. Inside, a broken legacy began to mend, piece by fragile piece. The chapel felt like it was holding its breath. Every second passed slowly, deliberately, as if even time knew something sacred was unfolding. William hadn't let go of Ellie's hand. He hadn't realized how cold his own was until he felt the warmth of hers, small, hesitant, but present. It grounded him. Ellie, he said softly, would you let me ask you something personal? She nodded. Do you know your full name? She blinked, a little confused. Elizabeth Marie Stone. William's heart stopped. Stone. That had been Ethan's mother's maiden name. When Ethan ran away, he stopped using Hawthorne. William had always wondered what name he'd taken. Now, he knew, it was real. She was real, and she was his granddaughter. William stood slowly, as if gravity had doubled its grip on him. He walked a few steps to the front pew and sat down heavily, needing space to breathe. Ellie followed, cautious. Do you have anything of his? He asked. Anything else? She dug through her backpack again. From the bottom, wrapped in a faded flannel shirt, she pulled out a worn photograph. It was folded in half, edges soft from years of handling. She handed it to him wordlessly. William unfolded it with trembling fingers. There they were, him and Ethan, standing in front of the old lake house in Vermont. He remembered the moment. Ethan had just caught his first fish. He was 12, smiling wide. William had his arm around him. The photo had been torn, right down the middle once, but then taped back together with care. A line of Scotch tape ran across their faces like a scar. He traced the image with his thumb. It broke him. His shoulders shook. He hadn't cried this hard since the night he got the call, but this was different. This wasn't just grief. This was shame, guilt, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Ellie watched silently, her eyes wide. She had never seen a grown man cry like that, especially not one in an expensive coat and polished shoes. She whispered, he used to sleep with that picture under his pillow. Said it was the only thing he had left of his old life. William clutched it to his chest. It was proof, not just of Ethan's pain, but of his love. "I failed him," William said through choked breaths. "I was too proud to say I was wrong, too proud to look for him, and he still kept this." Ellie looked down. "He used to tell me stories about you. He made you sound like a superhero, but I think he wanted to believe in you, even when he didn't know if he should." That hurt, and yet it healed something too. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket. "Ellie, I don't know how to fix any of this. I don't even know where to start, but I want to try." She studied him carefully. "Why now?" He didn't flinch. "Because I was too late with Ethan, and I won't make the same mistake twice." Her lip quivered. For the first time, she let her guard drop completely. She leaned forward and rested her head against his chest, like she'd been waiting for that moment for years, without even knowing it. William wrapped his arms around her carefully, protectively. He didn't care who saw. For the first time in a long time, he felt something real in his arms. A second chance. Outside the chapel, travelers hurried by. Flights were announced. Bags rolled along the floor. But inside, a new story had begun. One written not in wealth or power, but in pain, proof, and the first fragile steps toward healing. The chapel lights flickered slightly as the hour grew late. Outside, the airport was settling into the lull between departures and red-eyes, but inside something was waking in William, something he hadn't felt in decades, the weight of truth. Ellie had fallen quiet again, sitting beside him now, closer than before. There was a stillness to her, like someone who had learned not to expect too much too quickly. William stared at the photo in his hands, the one of him and Ethan by the lake. His thumb brushed over his son's face. "He was brave," William said finally, his voice rough. "Braver than I ever gave him credit for." Ellie glanced at him. "He didn't feel brave." "I know," William said, "because I made him feel small." He shifted on the pew, resting the photo in his lap. "Do you want to know the last thing I said to him before he left?" Ellie nodded gently. William took a breath, and it trembled. "I told him to grow up. I told him to stop chasing nonsense. I said, 'You'll never make anything of yourself playing songs in the street.'" Ellie's lips parted, but no words came. She just stared, as if trying to understand how someone who loved Ethan could have said something so cruel. "I thought I was protecting him," William continued. "I thought I was saving him from failure, but the truth is, I was saving myself from fear, from embarrassment, from having a son who didn't fit into the world I'd built." He looked at her now, straight into those eyes that mirrored Ethan's so perfectly. "I failed him, Ellie, not just once, over and over. When he needed a father, I gave him judgment. When he needed love, I gave him rules. And when he left, I let him go." His voice cracked. "I never tried to find him." Ellie blinked fast, her jaw trembling. "I used to ask him," she said softly, "why don't we go to your family?" And he'd always say, "They're not the kind that comes back." William lowered his head into his hands. He was right. I didn't come back, not even when I wanted to. Silence settled between them like dust. Ellie, after a moment, reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A coin. She held it out. "He gave me this the day he got really sick," she said. "Said it was from you. Said it was lucky." William took it. It was a vintage silver dollar, the kind he used to collect when Ethan was little. He turned it over in his palm, recognizing the year, 1983, the year Ethan was born. "I gave this to him when he was 6, William whispered. "Told him to keep it with him always. I never knew he did." Ellie nodded. "He carried it everywhere, even when we didn't have anything else." William clenched the coin tightly, his knuckles white. "I thought I had more time," he said. "So did he," Ellie answered. Her words weren't meant to hurt, but they landed deep. William turned to her again. "I know I can't replace him. I know I can't undo what I did. But Ellie, if you'll let me, I want to be in your life. I want to know you, protect you, be what I should have been for him." She looked away, blinking quickly, as if trying not to cry. "Why?" she asked. "Because I'm all that's left?" "No," he said gently. "Because you're everything that matters." Her breath caught, and then after a long pause, she leaned into him again. Not all the way, not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it, a fragile truce. William wrapped his arm around her, not as a billionaire, not as a man with regrets, but as a grandfather, begging for one more chance to get it right. The early morning light was beginning to filter through the stained glass of the chapel, washing the wooden pews in soft hues of blue, amber, and rose. Outside, the airport was waking up. Boarding calls echoed through the terminals. Suitcases rumbled across tile floors. But inside that chapel, time stood still. William and Ellie hadn't moved in a while. He sat with one arm around her, his coat draped over her shoulders. She was still watching the floor, as if trying to decide whether the world outside that chapel was something she could trust again. "I booked us a hotel room," William said gently. "Just for a day or two. Somewhere quiet, safe. You don't have to go if you don't want to, but I'd like you to." Ellie hesitated. "And then what?" "We talk," he said. "We figure it out, slowly, together." She picked at a loose thread on his coat sleeve. "You're not just saying that because you feel bad?" He shook his head. "I'm saying it because I'm not letting you disappear. Not again." She looked up at him, eyes narrow with caution. "What if I'm not what you expect?" He smiled faintly. Neither was Ethan. That's what made him so unforgettable. She bit her lip, and something in her softened, just a little. Then she asked a question he hadn't expected. "What happens when people find out who you are? That I'm your granddaughter?" William paused, considering. "We take it one day at a time. We don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You just have to be yourself." She seemed to chew on that thought. "Daddy always said the world doesn't give second chances," she said, almost whispering, "that if you mess up, it keeps moving without you." William looked at her, eyes full of sorrow and strength. "Your father was wrong about many things, but not about love. Love waits. Love forgives, and sometimes love comes back even when it shouldn't have to." Ellie didn't reply, but after a long pause, she asked, "Can I call you something?" He waited. "Grandpa." He didn't move, didn't breathe. Then quietly, he nodded. "I'd like that," he said, his voice breaking. She stood up, pulling the coat tighter around her. "Okay," she said, "but I'm still scared." William stood with her. "So am I." They walked out of the chapel together, slowly, carefully, step by step. At the terminal, crowds rushed by, announcements blared, and the buzz of the airport returned in full force. But between Gate 17 and the escalators, something rare happened. A man who had everything found the one thing he never knew he'd lost. And a little girl who had nothing found her way back to family. They sat in the quiet corner of a small airport cafe. The world outside moved fast, travelers rushing past with coffees and carry-ons, but inside their booth, time felt suspended again. William placed the envelope gently on the table between them. It looked even smaller now than it had in the chapel. Worn edges, smudged ink. On the front, "Dad, if it's not too late." His fingers hovered above it. Ellie watched silently, sipping a cup of hot chocolate the waitress had brought. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. With a shaky breath, William finally opened it. The letter inside was folded in thirds, written in blue pen, Ethan's handwriting, unmistakable. It was shaky in places, like his hands had trembled while writing it. William began to read. "Dad, if you're reading this, I guess Ellie found you. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe you threw this away like I threw away all the chances I had to be your son again." He paused, his throat tightening. "I don't blame you for hating me. I just wish you'd known the man I became. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes, so many, but I never stopped wanting your approval, even when I pretended I didn't care." William looked at Ellie. She was leaning forward now, wide-eyed, barely breathing. He kept reading, "This is hard to say, but I forgive you. Not because you asked for it, but because holding on to anger doesn't keep you warm at night. It just keeps you lonely. I have a daughter, Dad. Her name is Elizabeth Marie Stone. She's everything I wasn't, bright, kind, stronger than she knows. If she finds you, take care of her, love her, teach her what I never got to learn from you." William had to stop, his vision blurred. He blinked the tears away and forced himself to continue. "And if by some miracle you're still the man I remember deep down, the one who took me fishing, who used to hum Sinatra in the kitchen, then maybe you'll see what I see when I look at her. Hope. She's my second chance, and maybe yours too. Ethan." William let the letter fall gently to the table. He couldn't speak. Ellie reached across the booth and placed her hand over his. She didn't say anything either. She didn't need to. The silence between them was full of everything that mattered: grief, forgiveness, love, and the beginning of something new. William finally spoke, voice quiet and raw. "He forgave me, after everything. He still forgave me." Ellie nodded. "He loved you, even when it hurt." William turned to her, gripping her hand now. "And I love you, Ellie. I don't know how to be good at this yet, but I promise you, I'll learn." She smiled, small but sure. "Then maybe we'll both be okay." In that moment, sitting in a noisy cafe under fluorescent lights, something sacred happened. A son's final words became a bridge, and across it walked a man who had been lost, and a girl who had just been found. Gate 23 was quiet, tucked into the far end of the terminal, where early morning flights boarded in soft light and sleepy whispers. Williams sat with Ellie in the waiting area, the ticket to their connecting flight resting on his knee. It wasn't just a boarding pass, it was a symbol of a beginning, of a promise. Their hotel stay had been brief, just a few hours of sleep and a warm shower. But it was enough for Ellie to see he meant it, enough for William to feel that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't too late. Now they waited, not for a plane really, but for something more. Ellie clutched a paperback book she'd chosen at the airport store, her first new possession in months. Her small fingers traced the edges of the cover, but her eyes weren't on the pages, they were on him. "Grandpa," she said softly. He turned to her. "Are you scared?" He hesitated. "Yes." She nodded. "Me too." He smiled faintly. "But I think we can be scared. Together." She leaned her head on his shoulder. The speaker crackled to life. "Final boarding call for Flight 67 to New York, Gate 23. William stood, holding her hand, but before they stepped forward, Ellie stopped. "Wait," she whispered. "Can we just sit here for one more minute?" He nodded and sat back down. She pulled something from her jacket, Ethan's coin. "I want you to have it," she said. William shook his head. "No, sweetheart, that was your dad's gift to you." She placed it in his palm. "He said it was lucky, and I think maybe you need it more than I do right now." He closed his fingers around it. The coin was warm from her hand. She looked up at him. "Do you think he's watching us?" William's voice was thick. "I hope so." Ellie smiled. "Then let's make sure he sees something good." With that, they stood again, At the gate, the attendant smiled and scanned their tickets. "Family trip?" William paused, then answered with a pride that filled every corner of his voice. "Yes, the most important one I've ever taken." They stepped onto the jet bridge, and for the first time in a long, long time, William Hawthorne walked forward with nothing in his hands but everything he had ever needed: his son's forgiveness, his granddaughter's trust, and a heart finally learning how to carry love instead of regret. Some stories don't need grand endings, just quiet truths, like a girl finding her family in the place she least expected, or a man learning that redemption doesn't always come with applause, but with a whisper, a letter, a second chance. Have you ever lost someone before you could say what mattered, or found hope in the most unexpected place? Tell us in the comments your stories, your memories, your missed goodbyes. This is a place where real hearts connect. If this story moved you, please consider clicking the super thanks below. It helps us continue creating meaningful stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone who believes in forgiveness, family, and second chances. And before you go, another beautiful story is waiting for you on the screen. Tap it now, and we'll meet you there.